Okay, so this is the second part of the video lecture on persuasive speaking, which is again chapter 17. And we're going to talk about ethos and pathos here. And again, these are two of the rhetorical appeals, which appeals are strategies for reaching an audience. Ethos, pathos, logos, and kairos were developed by Aristotle about 2,500 years ago, but they're still really effective today. They're still probably the easiest way that I've figured out to explain rhetoric. And I'm certainly not the only one who feels that way. So ethos, again, is character, credibility, anything that makes the audience believe you. So it comes from the Greek word meaning ethics, but ethos, but it's not about ethics. It's about character, credibility, competence. It's about presenting yourself well, showing you're an expert, anything like that. So it can be the hardest appeal to understand. The others are a little simpler, but this one kind of is a little bit more abstract. It appeals to credibility and character, things like experience, so your personal connection with a topic. So let's say you're talking about a town where you grew up. Well, talking about the fact that you grew up there means you're an expert on the town, so that's an appeal to ethos. Education on the topic. So if I say, I'm an English teacher, I'm talking about ethos. I have a master's degree in English and have studied some philosophy and have read some of Poetics and Plato's Republic, then you're more likely to believe what I have to say about this appeal than someone who just on the street starts going, oh, well, the ethos of this. Publishing outlets where information is published can be an appeal to ethos. So if it's if it's published on joeschmo.com, you may not be as likely to believe it as if it's published in a reputable scholarly journal, right? So that is actually a part of ethos. That is something you can analyze. Biographical information, so things like bylines, which are the little bits of information or credit to the author at the top of an article, or biographical information, the bios at the bottom. Those things are also appeals to ethos. Use of reputable outside sources that appeal to ethos. In speeches, how you dress, hold yourself, talk. Any of that is also ethos. So basically anything that makes the speaker or makes the audience more likely to trust you is ethos. So perceived credibility depends on the perception of the speaker's goodwill. And goodwill is the perception the audience forms of a speaker who they believe understands, empathizes, and is responsive to them. So the more goodwill you create with your audience, the more they're going to believe that you have credibility and character. Empathy is the ability to see the world through the eyes of someone else. And in this case, to be able to demonstrate that you understand where your audience is coming from. Responsiveness is the degree to which you show that you care about the audience by acknowledging feedback, especially negative subtle cues like yawning or looking at the phone or, eyes darting around, looking at the ceiling, twitching, tapping your fingers. A good public speaker will see an audience doing that and respond to it and make adjustments to bring the audience back in, and that in turn improves their understanding or the perception of character, which is again appeal to ethos. So you have two types of credibility in a speech. You have initial credibility, which is the perception of your credibility at the beginning of the speech, and terminal credibility, which is the perception of your credibility at the end of a speech. And you want your terminal credibility to be greater than your initial credibility. So you want to try to build that credibility and character throughout the course of your speech. So some tips for conveying competence and credibility. Easiest one, explain your competence. Tell the audience about your expertise or why this topic is important or why they should listen to you. Use evidence from respected sources. I don't feel like that one really needs any further explanation because we've talked a lot about that in research and in other parts of this class. But yeah, showing that you know your stuff is an appeal to ethos. Using non-verbal delivery to enhance credibility. So audiences are more likely to pay attention to you if you're formally dressed, if you seem confident, things like that. Again, appeals to ethos. Use vocal expression to enhance credibility. So speak fluently. use a moderately fast rate. Don't go super, super fast, like it seems like you're nervous, but don't go super, super slow, like you're having a hard time figuring out what you're saying either. And speak with conviction. So talk like it matters to you. Like, this is important, because if you believe it's important, your audience is more likely to believe it's important too, especially if you've built that ethos and they trust what you're saying. Skipped a slide. So pathos. Pathos comes from the Greek word meaning emotion. Sometimes people have a hard time remembering this one. So you can think pathetic, which originally meant full of emotion. The meaning has changed over time. Or other words with path in them. So like sympathetic or empathetic. Those all have to do with emotions, right? Because they all derive from pathos. These are appeals to emotion. So these are moments when you empathize with the audience. They can be things like anecdotes and emotional stories, figurative language, impassioned pleas. Anything that is meant to make the audience or the reader feel something is pathos. So you guys use a lot of pathos in your narrative and in your impromptu speeches. Talking about your personal experiences, that's pathos. Using a vivid image to scare or delight the audience is pathos. Anything like that is going to be pathos. So let's talk a little more about it. So evoking negative emotions. I think you can probably figure out how to evoke different emotions, but these are the different kinds of effects that these emotions have. So fear motivates your audience to hear how you have a solution to that fear, how you're going to make that fear go away. Guilt makes the audience want to make things right, so they're motivated to listen to how they can fix whatever they feel guilty about. Shame, if you evoke shame and then show how you can redeem someone, it motivates the audience to keep listening. So you don't want to just make them feel purposely shameful, like that just makes them feel bad. You want to follow it up with, here's how we can fix the shame. Anger motivates the audiences to listen for a solution to the problem that made them angry. So people who are angry often tend to be more solution oriented. Like they're really angry about something and they want to know how to fix it now. And so that anger can be really beneficial as long as the anger isn't directed at you, because you don't want them to be angry at you, because that's going to hurt your ethos. Sadness motivates the audiences to understand why the sadness happened. So it's a really good technique to use if you want to explain a phenomenon, but get them to care enough for you to explain it. So positive emotions. Happiness. Listeners that are happy are more likely to listen actively. Just they are. Pride. Pride encourages a feeling of ownership regarding the issue. So if we start a speech with "Go Gamecocks," and it's about JSU, you're more than likely to feel invested in JSU and in the Gamecocks because you have pride, hopefully, in that team, or in our college. Relief. Relief has to be combined with fear, but if you start with fear and then get them to relief, then they'll be happy about, you'll have the initial benefit of fear, and then you'll kind of have some of the benefit of happiness, and it'll motivate them to listen. Hope energizes audiences to overcome the situation. It's especially good at the end of a speech, right before your call to action. Compassion motivates audiences to help those who are suffering. So it's good if you're not necessarily suggesting something that applies to them, but how they can help someone else. And compassion works especially with propositions of value, because it helps people demonstrate that they are good people and fill that need. Okay, so we are going to stop here before we get into appealing to logos, because this is the longest section, and I have some things that I want to talk about before we actually start really going into logos. So I'm going to stop this here, and I'll be back with part 3 in just a minute.